Do you want some tips to keep your employees happy? Money doesn't usually work for long, so more ideas are always good. And my guest today has got some good ideas for all of us to think about. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. And the mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they want, but we believe that care is better when it's just you and your provider and nobody else is secretly whispering in the provider's ear what their agenda is. Just you and your provider trying to figure out what's best for you. No hospital, no health system, no owners in faraway lands, whoever else they might be. Sometimes they have priorities that are not yours as the patient. And if the provider can get those away from the table, then they can provide better care for you. And today, my guest is Dr. Jane Krasnick. Dr. Krasnick is a board certified allergist who's been in private practice for 26 years, 19 of which in the practice that she started herself and manages today. Dr. Krasnick did her internal medicine training at Northwestern University here in beautiful, wintry, cold Chicago, followed by a combined pediatric and adult allergy and clinical immunology fellowship also at Northwestern. Today, in her practice, they see patients of all ages and all spectrum and allergic disorders. And Dr. Krasnick, thanks for taking some time to come on PracticeCare.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Carl.
Yeah, it is good to have you. And let's get right into it. Let's just give folks a taste. What is your single best tip that you find works for employee happiness?
So I think the first thing is hiring the right fit. If the employee that you hire just isn't the right fit, it's just never going to work. So part of that is trying to figure out what your needs are and what kind of person are you looking for.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because we've had a few guests on over the past, I'd say, couple of months, and we come at the same answer. The question is different, which is, what's the culture of your practice? Put three people in a room and a culture is going to develop no matter what it is, but they fit better together if you think ahead about who should be in the room in the first place. And so when you answer the way you did, that's what I think of is at least part of the answer is who's a good fit here means what kind of place are we? I think to an extent. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think part of the interview process has to include that, starting with, so I used to, in the beginning, many years ago, just put an ad in like a local paper for like a medical assistant or a receptionist or nurse. That's been taken over by online,
Right.
employment agencies. And so then now there's hundreds and hundreds of applicants to sift through. And so I usually start off with just like a phone interview with a prospective employee. And I ask those questions. I simply say, first I ask, why are you leaving your current job?
Right.
And I always ask them, what are you looking for? What is your ideal situation? And it's pretty interesting, the range of answers that I get for that. Some are very hyper-focused on just dollar and cents, how much they're going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And others do dig deeper into the lifestyle, hours, how far they have to drive, how much time is going to be spent away from their family,
Mm-hmm.
and benefits, for sure.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can kind of include or exclude someone on the phone before they even come into the office for the interview.
Yeah. And it would seem, as you were saying that, my reaction is the more specific the answer, assuming you like the answer, probably the more credible the person is to begin with. The vagueness just can't be a good sign, or is that what you think or no?
Yeah, and it's sometimes you're still, no matter what you do. I used to try to come up with this formula of someone, and I would think, oh, this is going to be perfect. She's perfect, and then they start, and then something pulls them away, and it's just so frustrating. And so, but I keep going back to my formula.
Right.
Um,
Formulas are nice. They're very convenient. They're repetitive. It's repeatable, rather. They're nice.
Right, absolutely. And so part of it too, if they're the right fit for us, are we the right fit for them? And so I usually have the person come in and not only talk to me and our other doctor, and also whoever their direct workers are. Let's say it's going to be someone in the clinical side in the back, speaking with our other nurse. But I actually have them meet with the receptionist too, because we're a small practice. And there's no doubt going to be interaction between the front and the back. And I trust my current staff so much that I want to know what they think.
Yeah.
One
And,
big happy family. So,
mhm. And sometimes they'll see really important things that you don't. And it's good to have.
oh yeah,
Absolutely.
and they believe me, they give me feedback.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd rather have it than just head nods and bury their, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So your single biggest tip for employee happiness is make good choices to begin with. It
Absolutely.
makes a lot of sense when it's said
Absolutely.
out loud.
Just
What
set
could,
yourself up for success.
yeah. Have you always approached it this way, or was there something that got you maybe thinking harder about this more recently, or was there a change?
I mean, I think that having had an employee leave, it does make you think, oh God, what happened here? Why did they leave? I have been very fortunate. My very first employee that I hired was my kind of front desk person. I was just, starting out with no patients, zero, starting from scratch. And she had some allergy office experience. And I kind of knew her from a previous practice.
Mm-hmm.
And she joined me and she stayed with me for 19 years. And so I was incredibly lucky. Her sister joined me a couple of years later and was on another front desk and now is my biller. And she's been with me for over a dozen years.
Mm.
And I have a nurse that's also been with me for close to 13 years. So I've had a lot of longevity and it worked, but then there's been some like kind of rotation through like the other clinical person or the other front desk. And the pandemic did play a big role in some of our rotation there.
Yeah.
Some being
What?
comfortable, some not being comfortable, things
Right.
like that.
Yeah. And you can't, well, how much of what you do can be done telehealth versus they got to come in?
So the receptionist could answer the phone and we can sign on to our computer system remotely. So they could do some like phone work and the biller could do some, but the clinical side, no.
Right.
No.
Okay. Well, right. Yeah. You
Right.
can't.
The other thing is getting back to the first question. So I had one employee who was just phenomenal, great clinician. Everyone loved her, but she had a lot of issues outside of the office. And those things aren't always obvious. They're an interview or,
Yeah.
they're not always spoken of, but just a lot of family issues that pulled her away. And it was so unfortunate, you know. So I guess one of the things I look for is just stability in that person and their home life. And I get
Mm.
into it. They must think I'm strangely asking, so, tell me about you at home,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it does make a difference. But you can't control for everything,
You can't, and it makes me want to ask. Let's take even a bit of a more step back and just tell us a bit about the practice from like the people side. How many people are there? And part of the question is I know you're a smaller practice in the grand scheme of things, and not that any practice has fluff in the employee headcount where if somebody left it wouldn't be painful, but my suspicion is it might be more painful for you than some
Oh, and
others.
and and one of the reasons that I say to people, like, I want to know about you because we are not like a huge surgical subspecialty like a urology group where there's just, maybe 50 medical assistants in a huge practice. We're not like that. So every person makes a huge difference. We have two front desk, a full-time biller, two nurses and two doctors. So when one person is not meshing well or can't show or it doesn't work, it's a big problem for
Yeah.
us.
So so the change that led you to think more about this maybe over the past few years, some of it was COVID that came out. Was there anything else? It was just the other thing you said that I thought was interesting is, this person left and you did what I think some others don't do, which is you sort of reflected on it. How do we not have this again? There's a whole swath of the population out there would say, well, let's just move forward. And it was them, not us. And it just perpetuates the bad problem. I mean, is that just kind of part of your makeup, or because the other thing is,
We,
it's not like
we,
you do a ton of hiring and letting go, and where you can sort of look at a pattern and go, God, what's going on?
right.
It was one time,
Right, exactly. So there was it was directly related to the pandemic. This nurse had to travel to the other side of the world to take care of a sick parent. And we waited. We were hoping she would come back. And then when she came back, there was just so much going on in her life. So we waited maybe 3 or 4 months, just trying to pull it together and cross train other people to do some stuff. And then I realized, I just can't control for all this stuff and move forward and just try to hire the best employee that I could, that was the best fit.
Right. Right. And, you know, I want to ask you a question we kind of didn't prep for in advance, but it makes me think about it. Like, hiring's hard. I mean, I had to do it in a prior career, and you're making a very important choice about strangers. So has your process evolved? Are there places that you go for like really good interview questions, or how to break this down? Any kind of external place, online or not, that listeners could go to that you
Right.
really
Well,
like?
saying that hiring is hard is, to me, such an understatement. Like, nothing makes my stomach drop more when a super valued employee walks into my office and says, "I need to talk to you." It's just painful.
Yeah.
Is all I can say, because I'm the one directly involved in deciding who we're going to hire. I do use a website. I don't know how we can speak
Mhm.
specifics, but I
Yeah.
use Indeed, and put an ad in, and right now so many practices are looking for people in all aspects, front desk. There's just a huge shortage, or people who have just left the medical field. So I can see who I'm competing with.
Right.
All these other practices that want the same thing. And so, yeah, I honestly, I hate it. I hate that part of trying to find someone. And just the opposite, when we just hired someone who started this week. It's like, so far it looks like everything's working out great. Like, we're so happy. We're such a
Hmm.
roller coaster.
Yeah.
I remember I called my front desk on Monday and said, "Did the employee show up?"
Right.
Because I was coming in later in the day, and she goes, "She actually has." I've actually had that happen where I've hired someone and they say, "We have to give 2 weeks notice." Okay, great. I respect that. I would hope
Hmm.
that if you left me, you would do the same.
Hmm.
So they, we wait the 2 weeks, and then here we are Monday morning, and where is the person? Never showed. Has happened twice.
Jane, you're in good company. I don't know if that makes you feel any better. Just from some guests we've had on. Yes, they just, and nobody ever finds out why, but if they make you feel any better, you're not alone.
Yeah. These are people that we did all the screening, everyone liked them, and then we called their references. They got good references. All's a go. All's a go. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if being paid, $1.50 more an hour made a difference, or whatever
Yeah,
was bothering them from that one job. But I always do ask. I kind of shy away from someone who's been at a new job every, year.
sure.
I shy away from someone who um doesn't seem to give me a good reason why they left one practice for another.
Yeah,
Or if they said they had a lot of conflict over and over and over again, I'm like, well, maybe it's you. I don't know.
yeah,
Hard to say.
yeah,
um so I think, like, when you're reading a resume, looking for longevity maybe at another place. So for example, we just hired someone who had been somewhere for, I think, maybe 7 or 8 years, and that particular practice she's with, that doctor's retiring. And such as, I'm like, oh, and she had driven quite a ways to get to that place. So our office is only 10 minutes instead of 40 minutes. And just a nice person. I'm just like, okay, check, 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 check.
right,
All these boxes are being checked.
right.
you know,
So what
um,
happened to her?
she hired and she started,
All right.
got her.
And about rough, estimates about how long these days does it take for you to find somebody who you want to hire? And then once they're hired, about how long does it take for them to kind of, get up to speed? I know it depends on the role, but rough,
Right.
kind of rough,
I
rough.
would I would say pre-pandemic, pretty quickly, like within a couple weeks. This particular, now post-COVID, took me months,
Yeah.
really months and months and months to find someone.
And
Yeah.
and the reason I ask is because it just puts more of a premium on, choose carefully and understand what you're offering. And that's the type of work environment. It's more than the work that you do. It's a type of work environment, because that's what's going to hold on to people if they feel like they're a good fit. Like you were saying, back to your first tip, choose well. And because look at the investment, that you're going to have to put in.
Right.
And
I think
so,
too, one of the things that is a big deciding factor for employees is the health benefit.
yeah.
Some smaller practices don't offer that just because it's such a huge expense for like a smaller practice.
Hmm.
Over the years, we've had to change that and do at least some partial coverage for some employees, or cover. And as one colleague of mine who's also going through the same pain, he's a pediatrician with like, I think they have like 7 doctors at one location. He
Hmm.
said, I've never paid so much money for such subpar help.
Hmm.
And I'm like, subpar help, what does that mean? They're people maybe without as much experience and they're asking for more money, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
frustrating. So that's happening too, that we're paying way more than we used to. Um,
Yeah, just to keep up. It's that's a whole series of podcast episodes right there.
yeah.
Um, you know, so what are some more, good tips on keeping employees happy that you can
So
share?
I, I think that when, employee first starts, I do try to check in with them frequently and to say, how are things going? I think it does help when the head of the practice approaches you and says, and care, shows that we care.
Hmm.
And then I also ask the other employees, how do you think she's doing?
Hmm.
And so to get an idea of the any warning signs, is
Right.
something happening? What's really frustrating is when an employee comes up to me and after, let's say someone leaves, and said, oh yeah, I saw that coming.
Right.
Well, why didn't you tell me?
Do you ever
Why?
ask them that? And what do they say?
Oh, I don't
You don't
know.
have to. I was just like, I wonder
They're
if that's
just,
ever,
well, it
it's a
was,
bold question, so
yeah,
wondering if you asked it.
writing was on the wall. I'm like, okay, well, why didn't you let me know next time?
Right.
I mean, I think that they understand that now. But I think that checking in with them and, you know, during the initial training too, like I try to have them come in the room with me and see how I do like a new patient, how I
Hmm.
do a return patient. And I try, whenever there's a teachable moment, I try to take it and say, okay, this is how we do the skin test and this is how I like it. And
Right.
the one nurse that we have is training her on all that, but if I have a moment and she's with me, I just try to teach them as much as I can,
Hmm.
and take times to ask how it's going, and so that I can kind of test the temperature there a little
Hmm.
bit.
Hmm.
So that's kind of my approach, at least for the new employees,
And do you find it works as far as you can
Yes,
tell?
yeah, and I think that like one time I know there was a very young nurse that we hired. I think what happens is some of like really young nurses, they go through the program and they leave nursing school and then they work in the hospital, and it's really hard, especially during the pandemic. Again, this is,
Yeah.
and they were just so overworked and tired. And so one of my ads that I had put in, because I've sometimes had an MA in this position, sometimes a nurse. I
Okay.
put an ad in saying, clinical office job, nurse job, nice change from the hospital.
Yeah.
But what happens is they get all excited, like, oh, that sounds so good. Like 9 to 5, Monday through Thursday,
Hmm.
no 3-day weekend, no evenings. It sounds so good. And I said, yeah, but I'm going to pay less than you get in the hospital. They're like, it doesn't matter. I hated the hospital. Then they start to work for a while, and then I think they get bored, because then they start to miss the craziness, and then they realize they're not getting paid as much. And so I've learned that maybe that's not the best fit for our practice.
Okay.
That maybe we do need to hire just a medical assistant. I shouldn't say just a medical assistant.
Hmm.
And that's where you get like a wide range of ability though.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the one hard part. Um, I've looked for someone who's, let's say, later in their career is a nurse who's really done with inpatient and does want that lifestyle, and that's
Yeah.
worked well for the one nurse I have right now. She's been with us for about 13 years.
Yeah.
That's worked well for her.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's important to like paint the picture, which it sounds like you're doing. It's, for
yeah.
example, so now it's Tuesday at 3 and it's kind of slow. What do you think? Are you bored? Are you not? Are you happy about that? Are you one to say, what else can I be doing?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's because the environment matters. It really does.
Right.
Um, Anything you've tried either, recently or maybe in the more distant past that just for employee happiness just didn't work out? Not necessarily related to choosing, bad fit people, because that was your best tip, but anything you tried that just didn't work out, and why do you
Well,
find?
I think too, like what I alluded to was I think I tried to fill the role with someone that's probably, I don't want to say overqualified, but was going to have that tendency to maybe think what else is better for her out there.
Hmm.
Trying to fill a medical assistant. I think a couple times when I had this one medical assistant, I got really frustrated when I realized she just didn't have the clinical skills that I needed,
Mm,
and kind of made me think I need someone that's higher trained. So then you go down that path, and like I described, that for some of them they're overqualified. So I think I I learned that lesson, that again, um, they want to feel valued in the role and feel challenged, and maybe like some of the nurses just didn't feel challenged in the role,
right.
and so I have to like, so I had to be more patient and wait for the right medical system, because there's a lot to choose from. But it's kind of like looking through a needle in a haystack to find the one
Yeah.
that's best for you. So I think I had to be patient with that. And my staff was great about it, picking up and
Well,
helping
they
out.
see it, right? I mean, they after
They
a while
do.
you
So the
see it's
front
like this is
desk,
hard. I mean, we're going to
right.
be, yeah.
Front desk would start putting people in the back instead of, everything on my one nurse. And she
Hmm.
was great too. She was just like, just take your time. We'll find the right one.
Right. Right.
But the
That's just,
opposite of that is, things that, what do I do? Like sometimes just spontaneous efforts of gratitude, I think, are helpful. So when we uh, were really, really went through a busy, busy time, and it was kind of crazy. I knew my staff was working so hard. I went over to a local like massage place, and I bought a gift certificate for everyone,
mm,
enough so they could each either get a massage or a facial, whatever it would cover, whatever they wanted.
hmm.
And as I was leaving on Thursday, I work Monday through Thursday. I handed them out, and I said, "Here, guys, just go treat yourself to a massage. Enjoy it. Things
Right.
like that." I've done similarly, like $100 gift cards to Amazon, just
Hmm.
randomly pass them
Hmm.
out. Um, we usually do like an employee luncheon at the end of the year, and a bonus and things like that. That's coming up.
Hmm.
So, just to know that they're valued, um, that we're listening to them,
Yeah.
and keep them happy.
If I was going to ask you about where do you stand on, you hear a lot of people say, well, you need to have like party nights and outings, and they talk about it as if, whether they mean it to sound this way or not, they talk about those are the things you need to do. You're saying, we do these things. It sounds a little more, I don't want to say purposeful, but related to something that makes sense. Like you all been working your tail off because of the nature of the beast. Here's something in response to say thank you, rather than some random, let's just do something. And the people who
So
say
I
this just
think,
sort of skip over the people in the room to begin with. At
right.
least it seems
So
that way.
I think that I know that my staff does do stuff together outside. I'm not included in that, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I think that I love that. I love that they all went to a play together not too long ago, and have had dinner together, and sometimes walk at lunch together. And so they do stuff together. And um because I think they really do get along. But I also don't want to like make them feel uncomfortable, like, going out ladies' night with me. You know what I mean? I don't want them to
Yeah.
be comfortable at all. But no, they're, and I think too, just like being interested in, when you like come in on Monday morning, how was your weekend?
Hmm.
What did you do? What's
Yeah.
going on with kids? And all those things. I think they like to know that they're not just the person sitting behind the front desk.
Yeah. And it just all sounds very simple and authentic the way you describe it. I mean,
Yeah.
say thank you for things, take an interest.
Mhm.
I notice you're not saying things like pay top of market, or pay more always, or throw random things at them. You're not saying those things. And it's like I was saying a second ago, you hear a lot of that. Um, We have a lot of guests come on and say it's not about the money. For just like you said, for $1.50 more, really, maybe they'll come, but they won't last unless they're a good fit to begin with. In which case, they didn't need the $1.50. But there it is. So I don't hear you saying any of these things.
Yeah, I didn't say it, but
Well,
I
right.
would say in most recent the hires, we've definitely had to give more than. And so what I usually do is when I'm interviewing them on the phone, I do say to them, what kind of salary range are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
I ask them on the phone before I see them, and if they're outrageous, then it's just not worth it. They'll be,
Yeah.
if it's outrageous, plus they need healthcare, plus they need this, I'll say to them, I say, you know what, you sound like you would be great, but I think you're outside of our financial ability, and good luck to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can get an idea, and then I email them a little bit more formal application that goes through like some questions and like basically lists where they worked and what they made and why they left.
Right.
And I go, if they come in for an interview, I look at that and I see, and hopefully they're being truthful, and these are things that you can call on and ask about.
Mm-hmm.
But you get an idea, and so I don't always know what I'm going to pay that person until I see what they're all about, to be honest.
Sure.
I may have a ceiling that I can't go over, but
Yeah.
I, you know, I gauge it. And some will be right up front. I'm not leaving. I'm not doing this job for less than blah blah blah. I'm like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah. Good to know.
yeah, it's good to know
At least
that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, not to suggest that money is meaningless, but just to
It's not,
say
but
if you lead with money, if everybody who's come on, including you, has come on to PracticeCare is to be believed, which I think they are, is it just doesn't seem to work very well, as a lead way to keep people or to get them.
right, right. But some are hyper focused on that, and I think when I look at that, when all they're looking at is the dollar and cents, then you are just a job
Yeah.
and not necessarily in their eyes their career.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to
Just a
put it.
job. You're just a job that, if something opens up closer to their house, um, you
Yeah.
know, what can you do? So,
What can you do?
and then I think too, part of that whole negotiation, I think the personality of it,
What do
I
you
think
mean?
shapes. Okay, so for example, there was someone that we were looking at to hire that was coming from another allergy practice. And so it would have cut down our training tremendously because she understood, the kind of the
Yeah.
concept of allergy. And she was young and she was smart. And it was only going to be for 2 years because she was open about wanting to go to like a graduate program, like PA school.
Okay.
But still, I thought, if I can get 2 years and at least know, and I
Mm-hmm.
can prepare myself. And she was she wasn't a nurse, and she just had a medical assistant certificate. And so we had initially talked about some dollars and cents, and the amount that she was asking and what I was willing to do was higher than I think I would ever have paid. Okay. So,
Okay.
but we agreed to it. She came in, we met and agreed to it. But then she started getting into, said something about her amount of time off,
Ah.
and made some comment like, you know, um, can you do better on that? Or there was something that
Mm-hmm.
kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. Like I had
Mm-hmm.
basically given her more than she had even asked for, and then wanted like an excessive amount of time off on top of it.
Gotcha.
And
Was it the ask or the way she asked? Because
it
that's
was
the
the
way you
way
ask
she
in a
asked.
classic negotiation. You're never the truism is never be the first one to put a number out.
And she's like, what's your best you can do or something.
So corporate.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just
And I said, well, the amount of time off is kind of in our corporate, benefits kind of, we have like a little, a benefit overview for the office. This is how much time first year people get off. This is how much second year. And I said, everyone has that. And I said, I'm not going to change it for you.
yeah.
That's not fair. And so initially she agreed, and then she said, you know what, I want more time off, so goodbye. And I'm like, good riddance.
Yeah, right. At least you found out. At least you found out before she started.
I
Oh
know.
my God.
I know. I don't know. I think I just felt I guess in a sense I didn't feel very respected. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sometimes it's how you say it's a very businessy way to phrase that question. What's the best you
Mhm.
can do?
Yeah.
Can you help with that? I've done that, but prior careers, can
Yeah.
you help with that? And then see what they say. But it's a totally different environment. It's not a
Yeah.
family. It's not a family, small family type environment like what you have at all. So
Right.
yeah, and it's business people, not doctors who are business people. So yeah, I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm not a bank, so
not a bit right.
not a bank.
Right. Well, I can shave 2 points off that loan. Yeah, exactly. Um, so uh, in the interest of kind of bringing us to the finish line, although we could, I say this to every guest, we could talk a lot longer, but in terms of bringing us to the finish line, is there anything you think I should have asked you that our listeners who are listening to this topic should know about, but I just didn't think to ask you?
So I think one thing is when you're hiring, like really try to think about defining what the role is. They
Mm-hmm.
need to know what is expected from them and what their role is. And also that there's that potential that they may need to do more. They may need to cross train and do some stuff at the front desk. And we always ask them, are you willing to do, answer the phones and things like that and do
Mm-hmm.
and do more? Um, and I always say to them, if you see something that could be done a better way, then tell me.
Yeah.
So and let's talk about it. And one of my newest front desk employees has been great about that. She's like, I think we need to change this form. This people aren't understanding this form, like when you turn 18 to allow your parents, blah blah blah. And I said, okay, come up with something else.
Right.
you know I think that's important for them to know that they're not just working for you, that they're working with you. So
Mm-hmm.
um that it's like my one nurse has been with us forever. I think like it is her place, it is hers. She considers it her home in a sense. And her pride and joy that this practice. And so it's the one thing, if you can instill in employees to take ownership in a sense of
Mm-hmm.
work, and that this is their place too, and if it can be made better, let me know, and work together, is really important.
Yeah, it's good ideas can come from anywhere, and no one person has a lock on all of them. So
Right.
absolutely. So that's good. And then the other question that I ask everybody is, so somebody, for those who are listening to this, we've caught their attention with this topic and some of the things that you've said. What are one or two tangible steps that you would recommend they could start doing as soon as they're done listening, that they could get going on this journey themselves?
In terms of keeping employees happy.
Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, I think that it's nice to meet with an employee in a non-confrontational way. Like, I wouldn't say, come back to my office, close the
Mm-hmm.
door, and say, how are things going? I think it's easier to pass them by in the lunchroom and say, hey, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, check in. Just do
Mm-hmm.
a check-in and see, even someone who's been with you for, a couple of years, just check in with them
Mm-hmm.
and see, what's going on with them. One time I was really surprised. I had a long-term employee who came to me and said, and I just adore her, and it's just great what she does. Said, unfortunately, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. And I'm like, oh God, why?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, we talked about it, what was going on, and it had nothing to do with the practice. It was all stuff at home, and how could we work through it, and how could we make it better for her. And we were actually able to do some things and make some changes and keep her.
Okay.
So I would say, don't ignore your seemingly happy long-term employees either.
Yeah,
Check
it's
in
a
with all of them.
relationship, right? I mean, every if you buy into the idea that every relationship needs work, no matter how new or tenured, whatever it is, then yeah, it makes a
Right.
lot of sense.
Yeah. So check in with the old and check in with the new.
There you go. Any other tangible steps you'd recommend? I was wondering about job descriptions, as you just go back to what you said a second ago. You could
Yeah, I mean, I
probably,
think
there's so many opinions. How detailed, how specific, how high level, what's your take on, writing a
so.
good
I
job
think
description?
when I interview people, I tell them in general what the job is. And like say, for example, the clinical side, be like, you're going to be putting patients in the room and doing vitals and
Mm-hmm.
checking them in, height and weight, and then letting me know they're there. And sometimes an asthma control test for an asthmatic. You might be doing breathing tests and just, and kind of describe. Sometimes people say, tell me what like an average day looks like,
Mm-hmm.
for this. And I think that's a good question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it's like. And part of it is clinical, part of it is you being on the phone. And then I think too, what's important is to let them know that sometimes, even though our patients are 90% super sweet and nice, when you are just on the other end of the phone, sometimes you are the other end of that wrath,
Mm-hmm.
and they, when you're calling for a medication refill and they haven't seen the doctor in 2 years, and you got to be the one to say no, but I can schedule you as soon as possible, and they get mad at you, don't
Mm-hmm.
take it personally. So I
Yeah.
think some of that is also kind of informing them, besides the positive stuff, what could be negative.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Tell them what they, especially if they didn't ask it themselves. Like we call them
Right.
like should ask questions. Here's some things that you need to know, but you just didn't ask about. So yeah, that's why I ask that at the end of every interview. Well, good
Yeah.
deal. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking some time to come on Practice Care. Very, very, I didn't know what I was going to get when we started this. Like it was going to be, throw a bunch of birthday parties or something deeper. And clearly it's something deeper and it makes a lot more sense as we talked about it. So thanks again for taking some time. I appreciate it.
Sure, anytime.
Yeah, once again, this is Dr. Jane Krasnick, and we will put contact info for you in the show notes, at least your website. So if anybody has any follow-up questions, they can reach out and see if they can get some time. A couple of points before we wrap up the episode. First, if you have an experience with the business side of your practice, like Dr. Krasnick does, or you're someone like me who seeks to service private practices and you've got some expertise you want to share, please, we want you to come on Practice Care. In the show notes for Dr. Krasnick's episode and all the episodes, there's a link. It's just a quick form. It's just so that you can tell us what's on your mind so that we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Practice Care on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks very much. And until next time.